Daniel Ricciardo's role in Red Bull as a full-time racing driver has come to an end, and it looks like the Austrian team is not fully ready to give up on the Aussie driver just yet. The value that Ricciardo brings to this sport in terms of marketing and business acquisitions is massive, and Red Bull knows this better than anyone else. With sponsors like Visa, Cash App and Hugo Boss already dissatisfied that Ricciardo had to be replaced, could Red Bull find him a more suited role for his needs? And if so, will Danny accept it? One of the greatest emotional moments in the 2024 Formula One season is the departure of Daniel Ricciardo and the fact that he drove the last race of his career with this team without us even knowing about it. While the management around the entire situation was quite poor, with hints about Singapore being the last race notched by Ricciardo's behaviour and post-race interview, Red Bull is adamant that the driver had a lot of time to prove himself, and effectively he didn't. This, however, doesn't mean that we are not going to see him more present with the team that started it all. And when talking about it, Helmut Marko has given quite positive feedback on the effect that Ricciardo has outside of racing, elaborating on the potential role that he could have in Red Bull after the racing life. Marko said, "Daniel Ricciardo is, especially in the United States, one of the most popular drivers. I don't believe he would want to try NASCAR, and on the other hand, if he is no longer an active driver, I don't know if he would then feel like doing all the PR activities that come along with the ambassador role." This would be similar to what Hamilton was seeking but didn't receive from Mercedes, as the Brackley-based squad has come to the conclusion that the ambassadorial role request of Hamilton was just too big for them to fulfill. On the other hand, it's still unknown as to whether or not Ricciardo would accept anything like this, because he needs to answer some more important questions right now, such as whether or not he wants to continue racing. It's more than obvious that there are few to no teams in which he could look for a seat, with Sauber being the only one left with an empty slot for 2025, and Ricciardo was not on their shortlist whatsoever. The Swiss outlet is choosing between Bottas, Bortoleto and Colapinto as of now. But nevertheless, what we must not forget is how important Ricciardo was when it comes to Racing Bulls, bringing some important sponsors to the team and uplifting the squad to currently be P6 in the Constructors' Championship. Visa, Cash App and Hugo Boss all expressed a wish to join the sport because of the presence of Ricciardo, as they all know how good he is for business. As a matter of fact, a couple of hours before Red Bull made Ricciardo's departure official, there were reports that Visa and Cash App threatened to leave Racing Bulls because they'll lose a huge stake in their business if Daniel isn't there. We don't have to look that far to see how big of an influence Ricciardo has on the Formula One world. Just look at how his charismatic smile and his charisma have drawn tons of new fans in the documentary Drive to Survive. Although his career has taken a wrong turn after departing Red Bull, Ricciardo's presence in the sport has remained on a positive note, and that has a lot to do with the American market as well. We must not forget how he entered the Austin GP by riding a horse, blending with the culture of the local people there, and what this goes to show is that Ricciardo is truly a man who can fulfill the role of an ambassador without any problems. Again, it's up to him to choose, of course, and right now racing doesn't seem to be on his mind, as he also understands that there is no place that he would feel happy with the current circumstances on the grid. But then again, Ricciardo has also refused to be a reserve driver for Red Bull, which opened up the door for Isaac Hadjar and also gave us an insight as to what the future holds for the 8-time race winner. If Ricciardo is to accept this role, it would definitely help his team in expanding their market and influence in the USA because of the new partnership with Ford that is set to kick in from 2026 onwards. And if I were Ricciardo, I wouldn't have bad feelings towards Red Bull because they were the team that took him in once he was treated the way he was by McLaren. And then when he wanted to leave them back in 2018, they offered him a raise just so that he would be able to stay with them. The fact that everything unfolded the way it did in Singapore is definitely a bit of a dark moment on his career with the team, but with the ambassadorial role that he could receive from the Austrian squad, anything can be revived, and maybe Ricciardo can find love in doing something else other than racing. Helmut Marko has been quite sharp when it comes to the competitiveness of Ricciardo being lost the day that he decided to leave Red Bull, which might or might not have an influence on other teams choosing him as a full-time racing driver in the future. When talking about this, Marko said, "I think the decision to leave Red Bull Racing was the turning point in his career. Then he didn't have a winning car at either Renault or McLaren. He did win at Monza, but those were special circumstances. I don't know what exactly happened, but if we knew, we would have helped him. But the speed and above all, this late braking and then he goes left or right, in these few years he tried, but it was no longer there. The killer instinct was gone." Ricciardo had certain reservations about the Honda engine, and apparently he listened more to the sweet talk of Renault and Cyril Abiteboul. Finally, there wasn't much difference between what Renault offered him and what we offered. At the end of the day, Formula One is a business that the teams must take a lot of care for and make sure that they find stable funding. The issue won't be Red Bull because they are at the top of the table and it would be very easy for them to attract sponsors. But on the other hand, the sister team Racing Bulls, which was previously known as AlphaTauri and Toro Rosso, has been rebranded thanks to the huge financial injections that have been brought by the sponsors we just mentioned. With this in mind, Ricciardo's departure from the team as a full-time racing driver will have some kind of consequences on the team's finances, not to mention that Visa and Cash App are title sponsors of the team, which means they are bringing the biggest amount of money in terms of funding. And we couldn't say that Ricciardo didn't actually help Racing Bulls in terms of performance. The results might not have been there as he failed to outperform Tsunoda in a fair battle, but the experience and the feedback he gave to the engineers did help the Faenza-based squad in building competitive machinery that would then climb 2 positions in the Constructors' Championship compared to last year. In terms of money, this would be an additional $20 million to the bank account of Racing Bulls from Formula One solely, not to mention the fact that they might be able to attract new sponsors thanks to the improved performance from last year. Nevertheless, Lawson is now the man who has some pretty big shoes to fill, and we're not talking about performance. The Kiwi driver is without a contract for 2025 because there are still some big unknowns regarding the drivers in Red Bull. So in a crazy twist, we might be looking at a duo of Verstappen and Lawson from 2025 onwards. The way that Ricciardo was treated in Singapore and drove his last race without a proper farewell has made all of the Formula One fans a bit angry, but according to Marko, the 8-time race winner was informed on time about this scenario and there was nothing hidden from him. Furthermore, the veteran Austrian said, "I think it was clearly communicated that he has to be significantly better than Yuki Tsunoda, and he only managed to do that in a few races. So it was clear that this story of the prodigal son rejoining Red Bull Racing unfortunately didn't work out. He said very well that he is at peace with himself and he has come to terms with the situation, and we will see what his plans for the future are." The timing of Ricciardo's release was related to a variety of factors and obligations. He was informed and the worthy farewell performance was, I think, the fastest lap. That still showed what potential he has. Not continuously and not at the level that would have justified him coming to Red Bull Racing, but that was an impeccable performance. With all this in mind, what do you think about the opportunity for Ricciardo with this new ambassadorial role in Red Bull? Let us know down in the comments below, and once you do that, have a look at the video that's appearing on your screen right now.